The way your voice sounds in your own head does not necessarily sound that same way to other people. Bone conduction vibrates through the skull and adds warmth and softness to what you hear. That means that you could literally perceive your thoughts as gentle, calm, and more nuanced than people around you actually do. And that creates a biological distortion between intent and impact. Hi, and welcome back to Reflect Forward. I'm your host, Kerry Siggins, and I am so glad you are here today. The hardest person to lead is the one staring you back in the mirror. Nelson Mandela once said, the greatest leader is not the one who has all the answers. It is the one who has the courage to look within. Most leaders avoid that confrontation, but the best ones insist on it. That's what today's podcast is about. How this mirror test, being really, truly honest with yourself, is the only way to lead. As you know, I'm a big believer in self-leadership. Self-leadership sets the ceiling on every single thing that you do. But the paradox of senior leadership is that the higher you rise, the fewer people will tell you the truth. No one wants to tell the boss what's really going on. No one wants to really give true feedback. There's all this fear, especially if there's not a lot of psychological safety within an organization. Your ability to tell the truth to yourself becomes a non-negotiable. I'd like to share a story about how I learned this lesson, and it kind of hit me between the eyes. So one of Stone Age's founders, John Wolgamott, was the kind of person who played devil's advocate all the time. He talked both sides of every argument. And early in my days at Stone Age, when I was working closely with him, I would come in and talk to him about an idea that I had, and we would go talk through it, and he would agree to it. And then a day later, he would come back and argue another side. And I found this to be incredibly disruptive and a little annoying because it felt like he was talking out of both sides of his mouth, and that you could never trust that he was going to be in agreement with what he agreed on when I walked out of his office. It was a little like inside joke between us of John playing devil's advocate and always just making sure that there was alignment because you never knew when he was going to change his mind. As he slowly exited the business over the years, it became less and less of an issue because I leaned on him less and less. And then one day I interviewed John. I interviewed him for my podcast and for my first book, The Ownership Mindset. And something came out in that interview. I teased him a little bit about talking out of both sides of his mouth. And he said, "Do you know why I did that?" I said, "No, why?" He said, "Well, in those early days, I didn't have a board. I didn't have anybody to bounce ideas off of. I had to test my own ideas because what if I thought of something and it was not very good?" So I had to analyze all sides of every argument and really make sure that my thinking was sound. I didn't have a board. I didn't have all the mentors that you have. I was just on my own in my 30s trying to figure out how to make this work. I was blown away. And it made me respect him so much more. He was analyzing his thinking. He had the mindset of just because I think it doesn't make it true. Just because it's my idea doesn't make it a good one. He held the mirror up to himself. And I so appreciated this. And I'm so glad that I interviewed and asked him about it, even though it was years after I was over being annoyed by it, because it made me really appreciate him that much more. He was willing to hold the mirror up because he didn't have somebody there to tell him the truth. Isn't that so incredibly powerful? And what I love about what John did in this whole podcast is that it comes down to self-awareness. The ability to tell yourself the truth is about self-awareness, and it's so incredibly important. Research from organizational psychologist Tasha Eurich shows that 95% of people believe they are self-aware, but only 10 to 15% actually are. Isn't that amazing? Yeah, we think we're self-aware, but many of us aren't. And that gap is where the majority of leadership problems originate because we are not willing to hold the mirror up to ourselves and say, what is the truth? So here's my challenge to you. If you automatically assume that you are in that self-aware minority, that 10 to 15% who actually are, that assumption might be a blind spot, and you should challenge yourself. You should really dig deep into this. And that is the whole purpose of this podcast today. So now let's jump into this. How do you confront your own blind spots? Let me tell you a story. We do 360 feedback all the time at Stone Age. And years ago, One of the questions was, does this person understand their impact on others? And I was rated low on this. And I was really blown away because I think that I show up with positivity and a can-do attitude, and I'm there to help people and I'm there to connect. What I learned from this feedback from my team was that sometimes I wasn't aware of what my tone was saying, what my body language was saying. So here I'm thinking like, oh, I'm making it safe for people to speak up. And others were like, no, that's not true. And I was truly surprised and a little bit confused. But then I had a deeper realization. You don't truly hear yourself the way others hear you. There is science behind this. Humans hear their own voice through air conduction and bone conduction. Bone conduction vibrates through the skull and adds warmth and softness to what you hear. That means that you could literally perceive your thoughts as gentle, calm, and more nuanced than people around you actually do. And that creates a biological distortion between intent and impact. So here's the thing. The way your voice sounds in your own head does not necessarily sound that same way to other people. You cannot rely on your internal perception. That's the leadership insight here. You have to trust the people who are experiencing you. So what happened with this feedback, and once I realized that I might not sound to others the way I sound in my own head, I decided I needed to slow down. I needed to pause before responding. I needed to make sure that I spoke with a smile on my face. I needed to name my intent, and I needed to check in afterwards to make sure that what I said and how I meant it, how I delivered it, is what people actually experienced. And the result of this was more psychological safety, more honesty, more trust. That is an example of a mirror. That is an example of self-awareness, and that is an example of using science to help you be a better leader. I have another example of something that I'm going through right now. So as I am maturing, aka getting older, I am mellowing out. I know that might surprise some of you. I'm working on not being such an intense human being. To me, what's really important is impact. So this internal evolution has shifted me. I no longer feel the need to win. I don't need to win every argument. I don't need to beat the competitor. I don't need to be right. I don't need to have the best idea. I want my team to take those things on. I am focused on impact, alignment, and ensuring that we are achieving the outcomes that we want, not from winning, also the experience that we're creating for our customers and for our employees. And this is such a different place than where I came from, where it was always about achieve, 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 win, 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 drive, drive, drive. But here's the leadership trap. These internal changes do not automatically translate externally. My team is still reacting to that old version of me. And what I realized with the help of our company coach is that my team didn't understand this evolution that I'm going through. And so when I'm showing up differently and saying that I don't need to win, I care about impact, they're going like, well, what does that mean? She recommended that I talk openly with my team about my evolution. And in fact, I asked her if she would come in, and we're going to do all of this in January. I'm really excited now. So I can share what winning actually looks like for me going forward and how I want the discussions to feel. And what I'm going to talk to them about is this change, this evolution that I'm making, and how it impacts them, how they are going to have to show up differently as I'm showing up differently. And that's the reality. We are all working together. It's all interconnected. We're all modifying ourselves based on each other's reactions and goals and drives and fears. So I need to make sure that my team understands what this means for them and why it is so important to me. So both of these stories really go together because what it shows is that growth does not matter if no one feels the change. Growth does not matter if people feel the change and don't understand it. The mirror test is not just about internal truth. It's about recalibrating that external impact as well. So those were a couple of my blind spots. Hopefully that gave you some ideas about how to think about yours. So now let's talk about the 4 common blind spots most leaders don't want to admit they have. These are patterns, not flaws, and they are something that we all face as leaders. And when we face them, we can do something about them. So the first one is ego. Ego makes us want to be the smartest person in the room, the most capable person in the room, the one that comes in to save the day, that everybody depends on, that has to be right, has to have the best idea. Our egos are protecting us and wanting us to win or to be right or whatever that is for you. But when we lead with our egos, it blocks collective intelligence and it creates a place that is not psychologically safe for other people. We as leaders have to understand how our ego is showing up, how it is impacting others, and how to keep it in check so that we can build from the collective where people do feel safe to share their ideas, to speak up because they're not afraid it's going to hurt your ego. Number 2 is defensiveness. We all get defensive because we want to protect ourselves. We want to protect our image. We want to protect our ego. We want to protect our ideas. We want to be right. And when we go into this protective mode, we do not absorb feedback. And when we don't absorb feedback, when we get defensive, it shuts down learning, it shuts down vulnerability, it shuts down people's desire to speak up, and that creates a blind spot. So if you're finding yourself being defensive when somebody gives you feedback or says that's not a great idea or calls you out on your behavior, remember that if you get defensive, instead of saying, hey, thank you for that feedback, I know that wasn't easy for you to give, then you are not creating that psychological safety, making it easy for people to speak up and say what needs to be said. Number 3 is inconsistency. Values stated versus values lived. That is such a mismatch for so many leaders. This whole idea of do as I say, not as I do. And that does not work. That creates all kinds of issues within your workplace. It does not create a great culture. Our values at Stone Age are practice self-leadership, be a great teammate, and deliver on the Stone Age Assurance promise, which is our promise to our customers to do everything we can to help them do their jobs as easily as possible and go home safely to their families every night. It is so important as a leader that I embody those values and live and breathe them for the rest of the organization. My other personal values are integrity and self-care and transparency and communication. I have to continuously live those to show my employees that, hey, these things matter and I'm going to show up with these values no matter what. And if I don't show up that way, then people don't trust you and you lose your credibility. Again, diminishing your effectiveness as a leader. Make sure that your values that you state are those values that you live. And then finally, number 4, avoidance. So many of us do not want to have those hard conversations. We want to delay tough decisions. And I get it because it's hard. But the only way to get good at doing hard things is to do hard things. And when you avoid doing those hard things, it compounds and magnifies the cost. You are a leader. You need to have the hard conversations. You need to be decisive. You need to lead. Don't avoid, step into leadership. So those are the 4 most common blind spots. And I'd like to ask you, which one has surfaced for you this week? Which one of those really resonates with you? Pick one and start to work on it. All right, so now let's dive into a framework of how you can start to see yourself clearly. I want to give you a 4-part framework that is a discipline, not a concept. The first one is name the pattern. Identify exactly what you do when you are not at your best. No story, no justification, just the behavior. So when I am not at my best, I want to avoid. I don't want to have the difficult conversation. I don't want to make people feel badly. I have spent a lot of my life trying to make other people feel comfortable, and I'm done doing that. I'm a recovering people pleaser, but that is my pattern that I fall into. There's no story, there's no justification. This is the behavior. Number 2 is look at the impact. Who experiences the fallout and what is the cost to trust, performance, and culture? So if I'm not saying what needs to be said, or I'm sugarcoating something, or I'm not giving the right kind of feedback, I'm not creating accountability. I'm not being fair to the person because I'm not saying what needs to be said. I am not being true to myself because I'm fearful of what the outcome is going to be, which probably is, oh, people don't like me. That's the story I tell myself. And this absolutely has a cost to trust, performance, and culture. So what is the impact that your pattern has? Number 3, ask for feedback. You have to acknowledge that you cannot always see yourself clearly. So invite 2 or 3 people who you work closely with to share what they experience. What is your tone? How is your energy? What is your presence like? How do you listen? Are you consistent? Ask them some questions and get honest feedback about how you're showing up. Treat this input as data, not as judgment. This is here to help you hold that mirror up so that you can be a better leader. The goal is calibration. Here is how I see myself. Is that how others see me? If it isn't, I need to calibrate. That is really important. And then finally, number 4, choose correction. What does your highest self tell you to do instead? Commit to one specific behavior to practice over the next 10 days so that you can be that higher self. Share that commitment with somebody who can help hold you accountable. Correction is key. Action is everything. You cannot fix these things if you're not willing to look at yourself in the mirror and act. Self-awareness is not built in isolation. I will tell you that. True growth happens when you let people hold up the mirror with you. So now let's talk about integration, what growth feels like on the other side. Here are some shifts that you might experience once you stop negotiating with your blind spots. These are the things that I have experienced. And don't get me wrong, I still have lots of work to do. I still have blind spots. We all do because we're blind to them. But if you work on these things and stop negotiating with your blind spots, stop pretending like they don't exist, you can experience these things. More emotional freedom. This matters because emotional reactivity absolutely drains your resolve. It drains energy. It drains clarity. And emotional freedom allows you to respond instead of react. That is so incredibly important. You have more trust and credibility. This matters because trust is the currency of leadership. If people don't trust you, why would they follow you? Without it, no strategy, no vision, no initiatives move forward because people don't trust you and you don't have credibility. You'll find that you have more courage in difficult moments. This matters because teams will rise to the level of your courage, not your intentions. It does not matter what you intend to do. What matters is what you actually do. And it takes courage to act in those difficult moments. So allow your team to rise to your level of courage. Don't just assume because you intended that they actually see that or care. You will have more influence without force. This matters because sustainable influence comes from connection, not control, and it accelerates alignment and execution. That is so important. We leaders, we have to be able to influence others. We cannot force people to do things. Well, we can, but it does not create a great culture and it does not make you a great leader. Think about how you're influencing by holding up that mirror, by being self-aware, and understand that it absolutely will help your team be more in alignment with what you are trying to achieve and help them execute better. And then finally, this is the most important one. This is the one that resonates with me the most. You have more alignment between intention and impact. This matters because leadership is ultimately defined by how people experience you, not how you think you show up. That is so key. Alignment between intention and impact. The closer you can get that together, the better leader you will be. The mirror test is not an event. It is a leadership lifestyle and one that I hope you take very seriously as we get ready to head into this next year. So the key takeaways from today's episode, number 1, you cannot outlead your own self-awareness. Self-awareness matters. Make sure that you are actually in that minority of the 10 to 15% of leaders who are actually self-aware. Work on it every single day. Number 2, most leaders dramatically overestimate their own self-awareness, which is what makes the mirror test so essential. If you think that you're in that 10 to 15% of leaders who are actually self-aware, make sure that you actually are. Practice self-awareness every single day. Number 3, egos, defensiveness, inconsistency, and avoidance are patterns that can be changed only once you see yourself clearly. So pick one of those. Which one are you going to work on? Ego, defensiveness, inconsistency, avoidance, and start holding yourself accountable to breaking those patterns. Whenever you see yourself falling into it, stop yourself and say, what does my future self need to do in this situation so that I can be a better leader? Number 4, the reflection framework gives you a repeatable discipline to correct your behavior and grow your impact. Go through that 4-step process again. Remember, it is name the pattern, look at the impact, ask for feedback, choose the correction. It will change your life if you put this into practice. And then finally, number 5, real transformation begins when you begin to choose to lead the person in the mirror first. Lead yourself. Self-leadership is so incredibly important. I hope that resonated with you and that you got some great takeaways on why you need to tell yourself the truth and why you need to look in the mirror. It's not something to beat yourself up over. It is constantly a work in progress. And that is what we are here to do, is to evolve. It's not to hide from ourselves. It's not to hide from those dark parts of ourselves, from the places that we need to improve, from understanding our triggers and our patterns. No, that is the whole reason why we are here on this planet right now, is to understand ourselves better so that we can make a difference in the lives of all of our employees. So I hope you love this podcast, and I hope that you practice that framework and let me know how it goes. Drop me a line, and I would love to hear more about how you are working on your blind spots. With that, I will leave you to your day. If you think someone could benefit from this particular episode, please feel free to share it with them. And if you like this podcast, go to YouTube and subscribe to it, or subscribe on your favorite podcast platform. Leave a comment, write a review, send it to a person who needs it. It always helps with the algorithms and hopefully inspires others to practice self-leadership. Thanks so much. We'll see you next week.